Alright everyone, we start off today with Canada news actually. We have to talk about Justin Trudeau being, his usual fascist self. Canada has, for a long time, been effectively regarded as U.S. Junior. That is, that it's a reasonably free society. Over the last couple of years, what we've seen, however, is that Canada is moving, much like Australia and New Zealand, I would add, towards authoritarianism, away from actual democracy, small d of course, away from any semblance of freedom. And this is the problem with not having a constitutional protection for certain human rights, is that you can have someone like Justin Trudeau, who is a fascist, effectively, trying to disarm people. Now, link in the description, archived of course. The latest move is that he wants to freeze the sale and manufacture of handguns within Canada, as well as importation. For that reason, if you are Canadian, I strongly suggest that you purchase an additional firearm now, if you have any designs on having one at all. Of course, some people prefer rifles. I don't know that this is going to affect revolvers. I'm a revolver guy myself, so it wouldn't affect me, I suppose. But handguns, so, the most common serviceable self-defense weapons that are actually physically available to people, they will be impacted. It probably will not work particularly well, partially because there are over 1 million handguns already in Canada. It is a fairly well-armed country. It's just considerably less well-armed than the U.S. Maybe they need a little bit of liberty, actual liberty, as opposed to what the U.S. currently is doing throughout the Middle East and South Asia and so forth. But the goal is never to actually just have the current thing, the current gun laws. We've already seen this. Canada's a great example. Canada has already done buybacks for certain kinds of rifles, massive amounts of registries and so forth, modification of, semi-auto rifles, I believe, to modify them so they can't hold more than 5 bullets, and so on and so on forth. So there's been incremental damage to the ability of Canadians who live in a rather rugged country. Overall, there are dangerous animals and certainly dangerous people in Canada. Justin Trudeau being one of them. Of course, he is Fidel Castro's bastard offspring. I believe that may be very well more than a meme, for multiple reasons, by the way. When we look at that, we see incremental damage to the ability of the Canadian people to keep and bear arms. Now, they don't have a constitutional guarantee of it anyway, so it's apples to oranges when we relate it to U.S. law. But what I would like to say is that that is where certain people in the United States also wish for the United States to go. That is, the idea that, Trudeau is literally using the Uvalde shooting as a premise for this particular move, and Canadians that I've spoken to largely seem to think that it will actually hold legal muster, that it will be implemented. Again, ineffective as though it may be. What we see in the United States, for example, wake of Uvalde, all of these other shootings. Well, we're not going to take your guns. We just want to be able to stop more gun crime, and so we're going to ban certain kinds of rifles. We're going to ban certain kinds of ammunition. We're going to regulate a certain attachment for a weapon, bump stocks or whatever, that we feel is scary. Time and time again, none of these measures actually do anything to curb gun crime. Most gun crime in the United States, for example, if you can call it a crime at all, is suicide. It's suicide and to an extent, negligent discharge. We register it as a school shooting if someone near a school accidentally discharges a weapon. Just to be clear, when you look at school shooting data, unless you go through the actual data itself, you're not really getting the full story. Each time that a shooting happens, Las Vegas, the Pulse nightclub, even if it's, related to certain zealot ideologies, as it often is, there's a push for more gun control, and it never does anything. The problem is that when you adopt that gun control and it does nothing, gun crime stays at the level that it's at, maybe it's a little higher, a little lower, etc., etc., then you push for more, because each incremental step does absolutely nothing. I love it when people compare, for example, the United States, in the sense of gun crime especially, to like Australia or the UK, to islands, to places with no land border to any other country. I find that astonishingly hilarious that these people don't understand basic common sense, basic reason. I love it when people go after long rifles especially because they're used in a minority of gun crime. If you wanted to eliminate a lot of the deaths that are related to guns, for instance in the United States or in Canada, you would focus on mental health because, again, a large proportion of the deaths and injuries associated with guns are related to suicide. In many cases, possibly a majority, I would say, any gun crime that's not gang-related, so it's related to the drug war, etc., or some other form of crime, it's an offshoot of it, tends to be related to mental illness, and yet we never talk about these things. Trudeau's suggestion here, if implemented, will do absolutely nothing to curb gun crime anyway because it doesn't grandfather in existing weapons. It simply freezes their sale and effectively their transfer. So you've got a handgun in Canada. You can have the handgun. You can get ammo for it. Nobody gives a shit. You just can't buy another handgun. Well, you've already got one. How is it going to take guns out of the hands of criminals? If anything, you'll see a slow seeping of that category of weapons. You can't manufacture more of them, so there's only a certain number. Over time, some of them will be burglarized. People break into homes. They find the handgun. They take the handgun, etc. There will be, effectively, if your population is growing, and the number of guns remains the same, fewer firearms in the hands of law-abiding individuals, and increasingly more, potentially, in the hands of criminals. It won't do anything as far as Canada's crime goes, and the idea of using Uvalde, which is not even in Canada, it's down near the southern border of the United States, it's closer to Mexico than Canada, the idea of even invoking that, even though it didn't happen in Canada at all, is hilarious to see Trudeau do that. Again, I encourage all Canadians to buy more guns. I encourage all Canadians to buy more ammo. I also encourage Canadians to protest this because effectively, I know the slippery slope actually is real on this issue. Trudeau has done this before. Each time he assures you, no, I'm not really an anti-gun dude, but this particular legislation will save lives. Has it ever done so? No, of course not. It's by design, it's not supposed to. To people in the United States, we should be going in the opposite direction. Not only should we not enact any new gun control, we should abolish all existing gun control. I think that guns should be mandatory within the United States. The idea is this. When you go in that direction, number one, you violate, in the United States sense, the Constitution. Number two, it doesn't help anyone. If there were at least a pragmatic argument to be made, if you could say, if you can actually correlate gun control in the sense of the United States with actually helping with some problem, then at least you'd have the pragmatists' argument to make. They don't even have that. When we look at Uvalde and we say, well, we need more gun control, Texas is a free-for-all cowboy state, and that's why all these kids are dead. But then you look at shootings in states like California or New York or New Jersey, etc., or you look at Canada, they already have the kind of gun control that's being proposed at the federal level for the United States, and they still have the same problem. That is that the solution doesn't solve anything. All it does is inconvenience and impede the exercise of human rights. And in the United States, the Second Amendment, the constitutional right to keep and bear arms, you are effectively not even a well-regulated, which is well able to function in 1700s parlance, militia, which is civilian population able to muster, unless you have military weapons. We've already been impeded from that for decades and decades. Yes, the American public should own actual assault rifles, not civilian knockoffs. Yes, they should be able to purchase automatic weapons. Yes, they should be able to purchase explosives. None of these things should even be regulated. They should be completely off the books. When people look at this, and they say that's an extreme argument to make, people will slaughter each other all day. Why don't they already do that? They already have access to, supposedly, according to the liberals, high-grade military baby-killing weapons that shoot 1,000 rounds per second out of their expanded clip. Why don't they kill each other more? These things ultimately are rarities. School shootings, mass shootings in general. Again, look through the actual data and you'll find that it's counted as a school shooting when some kid brings a gun to school and blows their head off. It's still tabulated the same way. Suicides are lumped in with gun deaths in general, even though they are single actor and they don't involve any attempt to harm other people. It pumps up the data, it makes it look more scary. That's over a third of all gun deaths in the country. As far as weaponry, in general, you find that long rifles are rarely used. Handguns are the most common. I guess that's the only pragmatist pseudo-argument that Trudeau can use for what he's currently doing. I don't know about Canadian gun data. Maybe they kill each other with rifles more often. Gotta go out and kill a bear and you accidentally shoot your neighbor. Many such cases. And that's the other part, which is that in many cases, when we're talking about gun crime, if there was an attempt to inflict any injury or death whatsoever, much of the time it's simply correlated with other forms of crime or with mental illness. A person has gone crazy or it's a drive-by shooting. In the United States, that is the majority of all gun crime. A supermajority, actually. Considering how dark and cold and bleak Canada is, suicide, I wonder why people would kill themselves. They're living in an igloo where 6 months out of the year they don't even see the sun. How could they possibly have seasonal affective disorder or something like that? Trudeau doesn't because he's a wine totaler, so I guess he's got it all figured out. So yes, Canadians should definitely own guns. You should probably get out ahead of this. I assume that within a few days all the handguns will have been bought up. If I had a gun store in Canada right now, trust me, I'd be massively increasing the available stock. I'd be doing it on credit ahead of time. Just jack the prices up. People buy them, don't worry. They should stock up on ammo. They should be well able to defend themselves, and then they should go and protest. Trudeau's government's not legitimate anyway. If you look at the voting system in Canada, a person can hold effectively dictatorial power, it seems, and get a third of the fucking vote. I don't even understand this. By the way, this is why the United States left the British Empire in the first place. It was things like this. Ultimately, the first shots of the revolution were fired because of an attempt to confiscate military-grade weapons like modern flintlock rifles and cartouches and stuff like that. It had nothing to do with tea. It had nothing to do with tax collectors. Those were definitely thorns in people's sides. They didn't start shooting until the regulars showed up at their armory. Just to be clear about the actual history of that particular period of time. That's about all. Peace out.